Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and welcome to another Shadows in the Warp list building edition. In the next two videos, I am going to be showing you how I would build a couple different themed Tyranid lists. And in this one, I'm going to focus on the core Swarm army, and on the video that'll be in the link below, that'll be in the MiniWarGaming vault, I'm going to be focusing on a poison army, so an army that is themed around toxic poison. First off, before I get into any of this, I want you to realize that these lists aren't the perfect lists. They're not like the lists that you'll always use to win in tournaments and beat the snot out of your opponents. What they will do is allow you to play good competitive Tyranid lists that'll allow you to deal with a lot of different enemies. But there will always be counters, and there's always tweaks that you can make. So you don't have to build your list exactly like this, especially if you don't have the models, obviously. You could substitute other things. You will not see all of the Tyranid units that are available in the codex in these videos because there's just so many of them. Tyranids provide a ton of variety, more than most other codexes can. I would even argue more than things like Space Marines. Space Marines have their variety by having so many different chapters, but Tyranids have their variety but that by within the same codex having so many different units with so many different configurations that you can start to combine and have fun with. So in the end, just play what you want to play, collect what you want to collect, but hopefully these videos will give you an idea of where you can start. So for this video, we are going to focus on the Swarm. This is the Tyranid list where you have lots and lots of models. The objective of this is, there's a few things it can do. For one thing, it just brings more firepower and more hitting power. It also forces your opponent to deal with more bodies. With some of the more elite armies like Grey Knights, sometimes they just don't have enough shots to deal with everything that you have. It also really works well for Maelstrom missions because you can clog up the board and really take possession of the whole board for a good portion of the game until your models are destroyed. But in that time, you could have secured a lot of objectives and a lot of points. The Eternal War, where you have to worry about the objectives at the end, well, you still have the same challenges that you normally would have, that if the opponent manages to kill everything, well, then you can't get those objectives. So this list focuses on the Swarm. So what you're seeing right here is a 1,300 point list of the Swarm. And then I'm going to show you three different potential modules you can add on to it to bring it up to 2,000 points. There's actually tons of different ways to do this, but I just wanted to show you some ideas of things that I would personally do in a game. No Swarm list would be complete without a couple of Tervagons. And yes, a couple of Tervagons. If you bring just one, you run the risk of rolling doubles right away, and half of their purpose, which is to spawn a lot of Tervagons, will have stopped. If you have two, then you're more statistically likely to breed the average number of Tervagons that Tervagons can do, which is around 15 to 20 each on average. And I always find if I bring one, I roll doubles right away. Now, how I kit out my Tervagons, the first thing is one of them is an HQ choice and the other one is a troop choice. Now, in order to make it a troop choice, you have to bring 30 Tervagons, but that works really well because we're trying to bring a Swarm anyways, and Tervagons are the cheapest way to build up that Swarm. And I want one to be a troop choice because I am focusing on non-unbound lists. So this will be in a combined arms detachment, which makes all troop choices objective secured. And having a monstrous creature that spawns more troop choices that aren't objective secured because they're not part of the original combined arms detachment, but still that can grab objectives and deny objectives, and also the Tervagon itself has objective secured, is just a really good way to do that. And also the Tervagons are synapse creatures, which provides that very, very vital synaptic web that you need to keep your army functional. I love to give Tervagons the Crushing Claw upgrade instead of their Scything Talons. Giving them a little bit of extra strength, bringing them up to strength 6 instead of 5 is nice, but more importantly, giving them Armor Bane really helps. Tyranid monstrous creatures, ever since the Smash rule was updated for 7th edition, just don't have the same hitting power that they used to have against vehicles, except for Carnifexes. And so I find that giving them Crushing Claws brings a bit of that back, as now it'll be 6 plus 2d6 for armor penetration. I also like to upgrade them with the Desiccarda Larvae, which is the 2+ poison template weapon. It just helps for when they're getting charged to have that extra hitting power, and also they can use it in the shooting phase as well. And whether you keep the Stinger Salvo or the The cluster spines is really up to you. Sometimes I like the blast just because then you don't have to worry about the ballistic skill, but other times you want multiple shots to deal with other targets. So they're about 50-50. I more often take the cluster spines, give them the large blast. 3 other major troop choices will be our 30-man group of termagants with flesh borers. I don't typically upgrade these. If you want to upgrade a few of them to have devours, that's not a bad strategy. If you want to upgrade all of them to have devours, it'll be a very expensive unit and it will really inhibit having a swarm, which is the whole point of this list. Then I also bring 2 20 Hormigaunt squads, and these are either upgraded with adrenal glands or toxin sacs. I never give them both unless I'm playing Apocalypse, where there's just so many points that I could put that in there. Now, which one I choose depends on the army that I'm going to be going up against. If I know I'm going to go up against a lot of vehicles, then adrenal glands for sure, to give them that strength 4, which will allow them to glance the majority of vehicles' rear armor in the close combat phase. Or toxin sacs if I know I'm going up against a lot of just infantry or monstrous creatures. Now, if you're going up against something that has a lot of toughness 3 like Imperial Guard or Sisters of Battle or Tau or Eldar, then poison is pretty useless now, because now that it's been updated, it no longer re-rolls if your strength is equal to their toughness. So adrenal glands will often be better, but the problem with those armies is they'll also have vehicles. So it's really a hard choice. I often bring them with adrenal glands, but I also often bring them with toxin sacs, so it really comes down to what your opponent has. To round out the troop choices, I have 2 groups of 5 Tyranid warriors, upgraded just with Death Spitters, because I find that it's a nice cheap upgrade that gives them a lot of hitting power. The Devours are only 3 shots at strength 4, and for 5 points a model, you get 3 shots at strength 5 with an actual AP as well, instead of AP nothing. The majority of the reason that I bring the warriors, there's a little extra shooting power from their Death Spitters, but they're really there just to provide more synapse. And if your opponent is focusing on killing your warriors in order to deny you that synapse, then they're not killing your large swarms, and that'll really help you. So this core army has 4 synapse units, the 2 Turbogons and the 2 warriors, which provides a really good coverage for you. And lastly, a group of 20 gargoyles is really nice because they're jump infantry, so they can get into the combat really fast. They can flank your opponent. If you're really brave, you could deep strike them, although I never really do that because it just doesn't usually work out, and then I have to have them in reserve, and there's so many reasons that I don't like to deep strike them. But having them on the table gives your opponent another target that is actually something they have to worry about, because they're not just termagants with wings, they also have the blinding venom in close combat. So if they join a close combat with another unit, they could potentially drop the initiative of that unit to 1 if they inflict any of their wounds, or actually any hits. So they're just a nice addition. And also by this point, we've already filled out our 6 troop choices. So this allows us to have another swarm that doesn't fill out one of those slots. Of course, this list isn't perfect. You could easily swap out Hormigants for more Termagants with Devours, or even just Termagants with Flesh Borers. Or you could swap out the Turbogons and just bring more Warriors and more Gaunts without having to spawn new ones. There are so many different varieties to this, but this is 1,300 points, and you can see how many models we've managed to fit in here. We basically have 90 infantry models that are the small bases, the Termagants, Hormigants, and the Gargoyles. And then we have 10 warriors and then 2 monstrous creatures, all within 1,300 points. So that is quite a lot of wounds for the opponent to worry about. Now, to bring this 1,300 points up to a normal army of 2,000 points, I have 3 different options that we are going to talk about here. The first one focuses on both Synapse and filling out the elite slots with a little extra firepower and the all-powerful Venom Thropes. What we have here is a Flying Hive Tyrant. Now, if you're going to have a Flying Hive Tyrant, usually what you want to give them is 2 sets of Twin Link Devours. It is just so much firepower with 12 re-rollable, ballistic skill 4, strength 6 shots. It's good against flyers, it's good against infantry, it's good against a lot of vehicles. It's just a good all-around creature. On top of that, it's a Flying Hive Tyrant. It's a Flying Synapse creature, so you provide that little extra Synapse, especially when the Gargoyles and Hormigants start to charge forward. Sometimes it can be hard for the warriors to keep up with them, and so having the Hive Tyrant up there really helps. I try not to charge them in a close combat. I try to keep them almost not even in the sky, just as a jump monstrous creature. Unless there are flyers, of course, in which case I'll want to get up there to kill them. The other really important part here is the Venom Thropes. Now, since we have 3 elite slots being filled here, I keep them all in one group. If you don't have other elite slots, you want to split them up. into as many groups as possible because they provide that shrouded bubble within 6 inches. That's the majority of the time. That's all they're going to be doing, is just providing that shrouded. They actually aren't that bad in close combat either, being 2+ poison, toxic miasma, lash whips, which make them initiative 6, and 2 base attacks. So they're, if you really need to, you can charge them in against something that is just providing you with a little bit of too much problems. Then we have 2 Zoanthropes here. Now, I'm recording this before the new Zoanthropes come out, so my strategies for using Zoanthropes I know are going to change, but it still can have the basic idea of having a unit of Zoanthropes whose sole job is really just to provide some more synapse, toss in a couple more warp charges so that you can manifest more powers and make your race that much more survivable. And lastly, we have 3 Hiveguard. Hiveguard are just great all around. They're good at taking out light and medium vehicles, and some stubborn infantry as well, with their strength 8 shots that ignore cover and don't need line of sight. They're just a good addition to the Tyranid army. In this 700 points, we have our heavy support options. All 3 of these will fill up your 3 heavy support choices for your combined arms attachment. We have a Trigon Primed. Now, Trigon Primes are great because they have synapse, so they'll provide you that extra synapse bubble. On top of that, being monstrous creature is really nice, as it just makes it that much more strong against in close combat against a lot of different things. I also like to give it the Reaper of Obliterax. This is one of the artifacts or the relics for the Tyranids. This gives him +1 strength and life drain, so he insta-kills whenever he rolls to wounds of 6. And it also gives him re-rolls to wound. It gives him shred. So it makes him strength 7 with that. It's just a nice little addition, and it just helps with his hitting power. And then we have 3 Biovores. Biovores are awesome. Unless your opponent is really mechanized, they're going to do a lot of damage. They just bombard down with the way that the rules work now with it. You can really even pick out characters or targets that you want to kill, but they're most of the time going to do very well for you. Always bring them in groups of 3. They're so cheap that don't just bring 1 or 2. You're just going to they're going to be hit and miss then. If you bring 3 though, you're going to carpet bomb whatever you want to hit. And then we have a brood of 2 Carnifexes. Normally I'd keep these separate because in their instinctive behavior it doesn't bother them as much. But since we're already filling out our 3 heavy support slots, I got to keep them in a group of 2. And these both have Twin Link Devours with Brain Leech Worms, 2 of them each, or 2 sets of them. And that gives them 12 shots, hitting on 4s, but twin linked. And those are all strength 6. So it's really good hitting power combined with the Biovores and the Trigon Prime. And lastly, we have the Bioblast Node Formation. So this doesn't take up any of your combined arms attachment slots, as it is its own formation. Now this one is nice because it comes with a group of warriors, and one of them has to have a heavy weapon, so I usually give it a Barbed Strangler. I just like the large blast. The strength 6 is nice, but because it's a small blast, it's just not going to be useful quite as often. And then the other 3, in this case, they only have Devours just because the points didn't permit them to get the Death Spitters. And then in this formation, you have 3 Carnifexes, and they must take 1 heavy weapon. So in this case, I gave them all the Stranglethorn Cannons, which is the large blast, strength 6, and a Tyrannifex, in this, once again, in this case with Acid Spray, which is actually my favorite. I find that it usually is the most effective. And the reason that this one is nice is just because it provides you the extra hitting power. The shooting distance obviously is really nice with all the different weapons, and it provides you with that 1 extra little bit of synapse. And then most of the creatures in there aren't quite as concerned about not having synapse, although you never want to leave Carnifexes that are meant for shooting out of synapse. There are a lot of other variations to this list. There are so many things that you can do, both in the main 1,300 points of swarms and all the ways you can supplement the 700. You can mix and match a lot of what I suggested. I know people would often want to bring Venomthropes because they just provide that awesome extra cover save. And other people always want to bring some sort of artillery from a distance, or exocrines, or maliceptors and the toxicrines as we have now. Or there's just so many things you can do, but this is a really good start. And one question you might have is, where are the Gene Stealers? And in the old editions, they would definitely be part of a swarm list. In the new edition, if you're trying to play competitively, they're not going to be worth it. They're just too many points for what they're able to do and how not survivable they are. Doesn't mean you can't try them though, because what I would do in the older editions is, instead of Hormagaunts, I'd have Gene Stealers, and then I'd have the Termagants there to screen the Gene Stealers, and either the opponent hit the Gene Stealers with cover saves or shot the Termagants, who didn't matter, and it just helped me in both ways. But I just find that I can do a better list without Gene Stealers. So thank you for watching this episode of Shadows on the Warp. There's a link below to the next episode, which will deal with a poisoned-themed army, which I love to do, especially with the new Toxicrenes. That is available in the MiniWarGaming Vault. If you are not a Vault member, you can still click the link and sign up for a free 7-day trial. And that way you can get instant access to that video and the other thousands of videos that are in the Vault, including all the extra battle reports and painting tutorials and everything else. It helps support us, allows us to do these videos. That's where the majority of our revenue comes from. If you are a Vault member already, thank you very much for supporting us and allowing us to do this. So go ahead and click the link below, and happy wargaming.